遗憾之争，你心是非，我爱不眠。我好了想牵动到谁，我只是一把摇结，只眼萤火上的点。你发如谁纷飞我眼内，我等待真正的谁。这一之间，爱在烟火上完美。你发露谁美？我眼内，我等待真正的谁？我只追及时的谁？你红泪，我忘记爱你的啦啦啦啦。追着为你忽视也期待多少风雷啊啦啦啦啊啦啦啦啦，空气音无节怎么为你 Okay, I'll stop. Okay, enough singing Jay Chou songs. Let's actually get to reading Umineko. This is when shit goes down. Let's do this. No, not again. Damn it. Why does this always happen? This chord. Fuck you, chord. Oh no. Alright. Now it's the next day, so it's back in the morning. So, let's read. I'm pretty sure. Okay. Genji tightened his bow tie and looked outside through a crack in the curtains. Maybe the rain had died down a tiny bit since the previous night. But the thick rain clouds didn't seem like they'd be letting any trace of the morning sun get by. The morning was dim and far from refreshing. It seems we'll last all day after all. Sorry for keeping you waiting, Genji. Kanon finished checking his appearance and exited the washroom. On their normal schedule, it was rare for anyone to have to suffer going straight from a midnight shift to an early morning shift. They were on a special schedule for 2 days of the family conference. However, unless the typhoon passed today, the relatives stay on this island would last until tomorrow. Kanon thought it would be best to prepare for a special schedule to last an extra day. The two of them left the guest house, opening their umbrellas. The Burrows garden had been devastated by the wind and the rain of the previous night. Even though they spent several days making it beautiful to welcome the guests, the stormy night was enough to ruin it. Kanon sighed. The two headed for the mansion. They were supposed to meet up with Goda and prepare breakfast. Goda was a perfectionist, and he probably had already woken up. He was probably already preparing breakfast as exquisite and elegant as last week. They reached the overhang by the entrance to the mansion and folded up their umbrellas. Genji took several keys from his pocket and unlocked the door. The Ushiramiya mansion was the only thing on Rokinjima, so in the past, they hadn't been in the habit of locking up. However, Natsuki had ordered the mansion be locked up from midnight to early morning. Ever since then, unlocking the door in the early morning had become part of the servant's morning shift. This task had been given to Genji and Kanon so Goda could start preparing breakfast as soon as he woke up. Silence had fallen on the mansion, giving the impression the mansion itself was still asleep. Well then, let us begin the morning chores. Yes, sir. The two of them split up and began opening the curtains throughout the mansion. If the curtains stayed closed, the mansion would remain enveloped in faint darkness, as though it was still trapped in the previous night. Following a well-rehearsed procedure, Kanon went around the mansion, opening the curtains for one window after another without having to retrace his steps once. Even with this horrible weather, drawing the curtain made it feel just a little bit like morning. While doing that, he passed in front of the kitchen. Even though he hadn't smelled anything yet, his stomach started aching for some of Goda's prized cooking. His only redeeming quality. Good morning. Huh? He tried to greet Goda, who should have been getting breakfast ready, but Goda was nowhere to be seen. The kitchen was darkly lit. Not only were the curtains not open, but the fan wasn't even running. It was still cold without any trace of a fire being lit, so of course there were no signs of breakfast being made either. Though it would have been inexcusable, perhaps Goda had overslept. Even servants are only human. They sometimes sleep in and show up late. In rare cases, such a thing like that happens, it's part of a servant's code to hide the unsightly scene before anyone notices, smoothly covering it up, and making sure the family never even realizes that anything has gone wrong. Kano took the receiver of the phone that had been fitted to the wall and dialed the number for the extension line in the servant's sleeping room. He couldn't hear that characteristic sound of a dial tone. Kano tried picking up the receiver again, but even so, he couldn't hear the usual dial tone. He tried dialing again, but it had no apparent effect. Could the lightning last night have damaged some of the machine breaking the extension line? The equipment in this mansion was all worn out. Kano fully understood that even the smallest thing could have caused it to break down. He gave up trying to wake Goda with the phone and dashed over to the servant's sleeping room. How long has it been since I stopped sleeping and started lazily staring up at the ceiling? That vague sense of awakening was part of Natsuhi's usual morning experience. Same here! Yeah. She always slept lightly and she couldn't sleep at all without medicine. To Natsuhi, sleep was definitely not a happy thing. Same here! I hate sleep. I would never sleep if I never got tired. When she looked outside, she saw it was still pouring. If she hadn't sensed a tiny amount of light, she might have mistakenly thought it was still the previous night. She herself was one of the hosts, so she mustn't wake up later than her guests. Urging herself on, she raised up her body, which still hadn't completely recovered from yesterday's weariness. No one would torment her as long as she remained inside this room, and her headache wouldn't get any worse here. This room was the only place where she could find peace. So when she left, it meant returning to the world where her husband's siblings kept trying to stab each other in the back. In that case, wouldn't it be better to just stay inside, locked up in this room forever? That ridiculous motion brought upon a bitter smile to Natsuhi's face. She was starting to sound like Kinzo. Though she often complained about Kinzo staying locked up in his own room and refusing to attend everyone else, the truth was she longed to do the same. Natsuhi gave her head a small shake, and her fantasy was replaced by the wee awakening of her usual headache. When she reached for the doorknob trying to leave the room, her hand touched the scorpion charm that she had hung from it before going to sleep the previous night. It was Maria's charm, which Natsuhi had received from Jessica. Didn't Jessica say something about having the power to repel magic and telling her to hang it from her doorknob? Maybe it was thanks to the charm that at least this room had been protected from the malice of her husband's siblings. As she thought this, her mood began a little more cheerful. I wonder if I have Jessica to thank for the little bit of peaceful sleep I managed to receive. Then Natsuhi remembered. That's right. Last night I promised Jessica I'd give her a charm of my own in exchange for this one, didn't I? Natsuhi opened a drawer on her dresser and took out an antique accessory case that she had treasured since she was a child. Inside there were many small objects that Natsuhi had thought were valuable at the time. From amidst those, she pulled out a red pouch. Inside was a small round mirror about 10 centimeters across. It looked quite old, but the design on the back of the mirror was very ornate, and it felt like something with historical value. At the very least, it seemed much more authentic than the other charm, which looked like a plastic scorpion keychain. She had heard this was a spiritual mirror for warding off evil spirits. She had been given it specially by her grandmother and grandfather's mementos had been distributed. It had been believed since long ago that strange power resided in this mirror. Perhaps people thought it could reflect calamity and malice in the same way it reflected light. I heard Natsuhi's family used to be like Miko's or something. Natsuhi returned the mirror to its pouch. It would probably be fitting object to hand over to Jessica. So, okay, another fun thing. So Natsuhi is, her Japanese voice actress is the one whose like you know, Seiyu or whatever, is like voiced by the lady that did Sailor Jupiter. I actually did watch that all 200 episodes of that Sailor Moon anime. So it was interesting. I liked it. So yeah, and their hair is similar too, which is funny. And of course, like Sailor Mars, I think she's also a Miko as well or something. Like a priestess or whatever. Just as she was placing it in her pocket, the sound of someone knocking on the door suddenly echoed throughout the room. Yes.
Good morning, madame. It is Genji. My apologies for waking you so early.
I'm coming now. What is it? No servant had ever come to her this early in the morning, nor had they come to wake her in person. Perhaps something bad had happened. Maybe some fatal oversight had been made while preparing breakfast. Something like that would shame the household in front of their guests. Natsuhi took a deep breath in anticipation for whatever troubles she was about to hear of. When she opened the door, Genji once again gave a morning greeting while bowing deeply. Natsuhi tentatively responded. Good morning. Did something happen?
My apologies. It would seem that the telephones have broken down due to the lightning last night. The extension telephone isn't working, so please forgive my coming to see you directly.
The extension telephone isn't working. That will be troublesome. Will it be possible to fix it?
I am afraid we don't know the location of the damage. Later on, I would like to call in an expert and have him repair it.
Does that mean we'll be unable to have it repaired until after the typhoon passes? Then it will remain broken down for the duration of our guest's stay. Will that hamper our efforts to care for our guests?
We will do all we can to ensure there are no problems.
Very well. I'm counting on you to make sure we have no blunders. Natsui let out a small sigh of relief. She had been prepared for the worst, but the damage to the telephones wasn't the kind of trouble she was worried about. Then again, even this would probably be enough to spark sarcasm from Ava. Natsui gave her head a light shake. Are the preparations for breakfast proceeding well?
As to that, we haven't been able to find Goda. The arrangements for breakfast have yet to be carried out.
What did you say? Natsuhi was indignant. To her, this is a much bigger problem, the phone's not working, and despite that, this piece of information was the part that had been postponed. Why did everything go well most of the time and then come to something like this when the relatives were missing? Natsuhi put her head to her forehead and shook her head. Well, I suppose he slept in at any rate. Just see to it that someone hurries up and prepares breakfast. I don't care who. What? Natsui exited in the hall and turned around for a second to close the door to her room. The creepy thing she saw silenced her completely. It was an unpleasant sight, as though someone had dipped their fingers in reddish-black liquid and scratched at the door around the doorknob. It was probably some sort of awful prank, arranged by some person who wanted to make it look like they tried to force the door with bloody hands. What sort of prank is this? How awful!
I just noticed it as soon as I came to call you. I will clean it later.
Perhaps
this is a vulgar joke by one of the guests.
Disgusting. Truly disgusting. Who in the world would pull such a childish and disgusting prank? Natsuhi had a pretty good idea, but of course there was no proof. So even if she pushed the issue, it would just seem as though she was making a fuss about nothing. In fact, it would surely be better to act as though she hadn't even realized such a prank had been played on her. Natsui gave the order to have it cleaned and headed off to the parlor with a squeak of her heels. When Natsui and Genji arrived in the parlor, Eva and Hideyoshi were already there.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Natsuhi! I heard Goto would be making us breakfast too. My stomach's been getting all excited since I woke up.
After all, it seems food is all you can look forward to at the head family household. I'm pleased to see that you too are in high spirits so early in the morning, Ava.
With a weary expression, Natsu returned Ava's gaze, which was fiercely competitive despite the early hour. Then Kanon jogged in. After bowing an apology to the relatives for running inside the mansion, he noticed Genji and told him something in a small voice.
Kanon, have you still not found Goda?
My apologies, madame. I went all over the inside of the mansion and the guest house. I still haven't found him.
Where in the world has he gone? At any rate, breakfast is a higher priority than finding Goda right now. See to it immediately.
Yes. Kanon glanced at Genji. It seems he had something else to report, but was uncertain whether or not the words should come from him. Genji nodded and decided to give the report himself.
Madame, it is not only Goda. Your husband is also nowhere to be found.
My husband?
Yes. Even before visiting you, I went to his room to tell him that breakfast wasn't being prepared, but I did not find him anywhere. Furthermore, he is not the only one missing. Rudolph, his wife, and Rosa are nowhere to be found, and therefore the person that's reading the voices don't have to worry about sounding not like a guy. Because they have a limited voice range.
Not in the guest house, nor the mansion? Yes, they were not in their rooms in the guest house either. When she heard that Goda alone was missing, she assumed she had slept in, or he was loafing around somewhere. However, now that she learned that the several relatives were also nowhere to be seen, she began to take a slightly more optimistic view. Could last night's family conference have continued all night, up until the present moment? If so, they might have wanted to cool their heads after being shut in a stuffy room, going out for walks on their own through the rain. The part about cooling their heads really sounded like something Kraus would say. Goda had probably been summoned to accompany them and aid them in some way. Goda was not a man who lost track of time. He had to understand the preparations for breakfast would be hindered if he did not return. However, maybe the family conference had continued until this very moment. With an atmosphere that would make it very hard for anyone to slip out. Yes, that theory would be quite convincing for Natsuki. She remembered the illusion she felt that morning as though the previous night had never ended. When she learned the feeling wasn't just an illusion, she once again took a deep, weary breath. After all, that banquet of filthy vultures circling Kinzo's property was still going on.
Perhaps they are still discussing the inheritance, somewhere in the garden, or maybe the beach. At any rate, if we don't call Goda back, we'll never be able to begin preparations for breakfast.
So what are you saying? Are Nisa and the rest still continuing their discussion? She planned to say it in a small voice, but Hideyoshi overheard Natsuki and managed to grasp the situation.
Nissan and Rudolph sure are tough. Maybe it's just youth and Rosa's canes. Just a bit after midnight, the two of us were so tired that we headed back to bed. Though I do remember that Nissan and the rest were still having a heated discussion at that point. Men certainly are unpleasant when they get all fired up.
Natsuki snorted, her face still blank.
Kanon, search outside. If you find Goda, tell him to return immediately and begin preparing breakfast.
Certainly.
Natsuki, we don't know for sure that they're outside, do we? Couldn't they also be inside Father's study?
I see, that's certainly possible. I don't know what that path their conversation took, but there's certainly a chance they moved to Father's study and let him in on the discussion.
I can't imagine that Father would willingly let him bring such a detestable topic into his study. You really think so? Well then, there's nothing we can do. I'm sorry, Genji and Kanon, but could you search outside? It would be strange for Nissan to suggest they go outside to walk to cool their heads, even in this weather. I'll go to Father's study. Who knows? They might actually be there after all.
Ava, I wouldn't ask a guest like you to exert herself so.
I will go.
I can also wish him a good morning while I'm at it.
Oh, then I'll leave it in your hands, though I somehow doubt he'll return your greeting. Natsuki, have you always been on such good terms with Father?
I don't know whether you could call it that, but I'm sure that I've gained his trust as the wife and the successor to the Ushiromiya family. Then I'm sure he'll at least answer you right. I'd like to at least have breakfast with Father. Do you think you could convince him to come down and join us? It seems that he thoroughly despises the rest of us, but I'm sure he'll listen to you if he trusts you that much. After speaking so boldly, if you're unable to convince Father and come down alone, then I doubt you'll ever be able to claim that you've earned his trust again. I am not confident, but I will try. Natsui responded, looking discouraged. However, knowing Kinzo's temperament, she had absolutely no confidence in her ability to bring him out. Ava was clearly mocking her, confident that Natsui wouldn't be able to get Kinzo to come down. But even so, Natsui would lose face if she gave up, saying it was impossible and letting Ava go instead. Ava's mean-spirited and unreasonable demand made Natsui clench her fists slightly. When Genji realized this, he spoke softly over her shoulder.
Madame, please take this if you would.
And this is... Genji handed Natsuki a sparkling gold key of ornate design. It was a key to Kinzo's study. The study had an auto lock and couldn't be unlocked as long as Kinzo forbade the entrance. However, since Genji was especially trusted by Kinzo, he was allowed to carry a key to that door. But if this key is used, won't you also receive the blame?
When the master is sleeping deeply, simply knocking on the door will not suffice. And it would be more difficult to persuade the master to leave his room if you must walk through the door. Please use this.
Talk. Genji. Until now, Natsui had thought of Genji as a cold servant who wouldn't do anything for her since he was working directly under Kinzo. But luckily she would have to alter her understanding of him. She wanted to communicate her gratitude, but by then, Genji had already turned his back on her and was walking down the corridor with Kanon. But as Natsui watched them go, the words directed at her from behind were sneering.
Well then, you must bring Father with you, okay? After all, it's his son's precious wife who's asking. I'm sure he'll listen to you. We're guests, so just relax here at our own leisure.
Quit it, Ava. You're taking this too far. Sorry, Natsui, but we're counting on you to deal with Father. Without answering, Natsui forcefully spun around on her heels and quickly left that place. After all the excitement the previous night, there was no way anyone was going to wake up early. George, Jessica, and I were snoring loudly on the beds in his cousin's room. But Maria, who had gone straight to bed without joining in, was completely awake. As she rubbed her sleepy eyes and looked around, she was met with loud snoring of other three cousins. For a while, Maria had to think about what happened. After that, she realized her mother wasn't with her. She quickly got lonely. Maria left the cousin's room trying to head to the room that had been arranged for her and her mother. Paying no heed to the three who were sleeping soundly, she slammed the door shut. In response, Bowler mumbled, rolled over in his sleep, but it wasn't enough to wake him up. After a while, Maria returned, once again, closing the door with a lively bang. Ugh. As she left her room, her place had been completely sleepy, but now that she was back, she looked irritated. After that, she climbed on Balor's bed, which happened to be the closest, and started yelling and jumping on it like it was a trampoline. Wake up! What? Is it an enemy raid? Surround them! After making sure I was awake, Maria moved over to George's bed and started jumping on that too. In that manner, the three of us were all greeted with an extremely pleasant awakening. Thanks for waking us up, Maria. You stopped us from sleeping in after that late night. If only you could have been a bit more gentle about it. George, you really are an adult. I respect that. It'll be 7 soon. Well, it's not really a bad time to wake up. I wonder if she's already woken up and gone to the mansion. Not here! Mama! Maria kept groaning, and looking unhappy. She didn't seem exactly lonely because her mother wasn't around. It was more like she was irritated and thrown off balance because her mother wasn't where she expected. If we could just tell her where her mother was, that alone would probably calm her down. But unfortunately, we had no way of knowing where Aunt Rosa was except that she wasn't here. Anyway, it's time for breakfast, so let's head over to the mansion. That's right. Maria, let's go to the mansion together, okay? I'm sure Aunt Rosa will be there too. Huh? Mama's in the mansion? Then I'll go there. Yeah, guess we should go to the mansion. Our parents have already gone there. Maria regained her usual composure so completely, her earlier tantrum now seemed like a lie. We got dressed, left the room, and headed for the mansion. Once more, there was a knocking sound on the study door. But there was no answer. He seemed to be sleeping still, and I could not wake him. If she went back downstairs and said something like that, Ava would probably be amused and triumphant. And even putting Ava aside, it was problematic that Kinzo had stayed shut during the entire once-a-year conference, not even coming down to greet anyone. Even the family head. No, especially the family head, couldn't fail to make an appearance. I wonder if I can convince him myself. Natsui readied herself and used the key that she'd borrowed from Genji to open the door. Even though she was prepared for the sweet stench which seemed to eat into one's brain as it poured out in the small crack of the door, she couldn't help but grimace. Thinking that he might still be sleeping, Natsui entered the room quietly. When she did, Kinzo was already awake and looking down the window. So you're awake. Good morning. How did you get in? Kinzo spoke with his back still facing her. His voice was not harsh but calm, and Natsui was slightly reassured. However, though he was awake, he wouldn't have ignored all that knocking if he was in a good mood. Natsui wasn't able to relax. My sincere apologies. I asked Genji. He allowed me to borrow the key to the study. Oh, Genji did. If my friend thought it was that important, I have no choice but to listen. So, what business do you have with me? Well, breakfast will be ready soon, and I would greatly appreciate it if you join us. I will eat here. Have her brought here like always. But, Father, this family conference happens only once a year. Please at least let them see your face. Go back downstairs. Are you asking me to join in as to discuss how to chew up my inheritance after I die? How foolish! Let them speak of such matters as much as they please without me. And if that's what you call a family conference, it's hardly worth leaving my room for it. I am busy. Do not bother me. His last words carried the threat that any further questions would not be appreciated. Natsui realized that after adding any further pleas would finally bring his wrath down upon her. She didn't look forward to facing Ava's sarcasm, but there was nothing more than Natsui could do. Is that so? Understood. I'm sure everyone will be sorry to hear it, but I will tell them. Natsui decided to give up. Bowing silently, she tried to leave the room before Kinzo's spasmodic temper would flare up. As she did, Kinzo spoke to her. His voice was so calm and gentle it felt like it came from an entirely different person.
Natsuhi, it has been quite some time since you married into the Ushiromiya family.
Yes, it has been many years since I was first permitted to bear the name Ushiromiya.
Do you sometimes long for your previous family?
No. Marriage means abandoning your birth family. I am Ushiromiya Natsuhi. The Ushiromiya family is the only family I can come home to, the only one I am fond of. She truly wasn't exaggerating. Such was the resolve she felt whenever she applied the Ushiromiya family name to herself. And that's precisely why she was so saddened when her husband didn't treat her like an Ushiromiya, leaving her to race about in vain.
If Kraus were a woman, and you his husband... No, I won't say that.
What do you mean by that? Father? Natsuhi was shocked. If Kinzo's words just now were what they seemed, it would have been more than enough to make up for all that she had suffered up to that point.
Forget it. It's just a nonsense of an old man.
Kinzo once again faced away from her. He told her to forget it, but Natsuhi couldn't help but feel a warmth in her heart. Father, even though I, Natsuhi, am not connected to you by blood, I am still your daughter. I will most assuredly see to it that your honor and glory and everything that you left behind are protected.
You do not have the right to wear the one-winged eagle. However, the one-winged eagle is surely engraved in your heart. It is irrefutable proof that you are my blood relative, one who will inherit the glory of the Ushiromiya family. Some will sneer that there is no eagle on your clothes. Such words are not worth lending an ear to. Only those who hold the eagle in their hearts are my true blood relatives. I now consider it an honor that you are welcomed in the Ushiromiya family.
Without saying anything more, Kinzo remained with his back to Natsuhi. However, Natsuhi couldn't help but feel something warm well up inside her that she hadn't felt since long ago when she had just been a child. Natsuhi bowed silently to his back and left the room.
Ah, good timing. How is father? You were taking so long, so I came in to check.
When Natsuhi left the study, she saw Ava climbing up the stairs, and their eyes met. Ava was smirking unpleasantly, thinking that Natsuhi would leave grudgingly after failing to convince Kinzo. How the way Natsuhi was now, such a frivolous laugh would not disturb her. She was not permitted to wear the family crest on her clothing, but she was permitted to wear it in her heart. Notice this? These are the crests. Ava wears it all over, and a lot of the Ushiromiya do too, and the servants also wear the crest. But Natsuhi can't wear it, and you don't see Hideyoshi, and you don't see Hirie wearing those crests. So when she spoke calmly, clearly, and confidently, with the dignity of one who protected the Ushiromiya family's glory. Father said he would not join in on the family conference. He says he has no interest in discussing such obscene matters.
I figured you'd say something like that. If you failed to persuade father, just say so.
How pitiful. I'm beginning to see why father lamented so.
What do you mean by that?
Natsuhi did not answer. Just as Kinzo had done earlier, she showed Ava her back as she headed down the stairs. Ava finally realized she was being made fun of, something that happened to quickly bolster Natsuhi's confidence. But even so, she apparently didn't have the courage to risk Kinzo's wrath. Unable to even knock on the door, she would only click her tongue and make a motion as though scratching at it and following after Natsuhi. Another quick interjection. So notice that Ava has the crest basically emblazoned all over her clothes compared to other people in the family. They have the crest, but it's not like it's at one place. But Ava is proud to be in Ushiramiya. From, like, if you could see from her design. She's the most proud of it. Okay, she really loves being in Ushiramiya. And I can see why, considering that she kept her maiden name. And Hideyoshi bore the name of Ushiramiya instead, so she didn't have to leave the family. I think that's what I really like about Ava's design, and what I like about Ava in general. I find it really interesting that she also has, like, Chinese influence in her clothing as well. Okay. Sorry that I interjected with that.
So, were Nisa and the rest there? Did you ask Father about them?
I didn't get the chance to ask, but they were not inside the study. Father would never let them into his room to discuss such a lowly topic, so it was unlikely he knows where they went. Let's go downstairs and wait for the servants to return from their search. Breakfast may be late, but how would you like some tea, Ava?
That would be fine.
Ava couldn't hide her confusion at the complete difference in Natsu's attitude. She was acting so boldly, and while Ava hated to admit it, she even had a sense of dignity about them. Unable to find fault with anything, Ava could only follow Natsu back to the parlor. Shipping time! Ah, yeah, Rika Sadako, Natsu Ava. I mean, I do like them together. Okay. When the two of them returned to the parlor, Hideyoshi had been joined by the 4 children and Nanjo. Genju had been talking with Hideyoshi to report the current situation when he noticed Natsuki had returned. I'm not saying Hideyoshi should be divorced. Nah, they can be in a poly.
You still have not found my husband and the rest. Yes, my apologies. Also, Kumasawa has started preparing breakfast. She said she will need just a little longer.
The clock read a little past 8. 8 should have been the time to start breakfast. Normally, going over that time limit would be a disgrace to the host.
Canon is now searching outside. Also, no one has seen Shannon either. Even Shannon's missing. Truly, just how many people did my husband bring with him on his little walk?
Just how many people had gone missing by now? Now that the number was this large, it was starting to truly feel unpleasant, as though the people here were the only ones left out of something interesting. At least, that seemed to reflect the feelings of the children, and Maria in particular. She was indignant, her stomach grumbling, almost as though her mother and the others had left her alone to go eat off something delicious without her. The other children were flipping through the channels on the television, trying to find a program that might interest Maria and cheer her up again. Nanjo was sitting on the sofa, gazing wistfully at the children while reading a book. It must have been a book about chess. The sound of footsteps came rushing toward them with a pitter-patter. There was only one set. They realized before seeing who it belonged to, it was probably Canon, not Kraus and the rest.
Madame, excuse me. Judging by your appearance, you still haven't been able to find them. My apologies. I still haven't. That will be enough. You've worked hard.
She didn't know where they were, but they had to be somewhere on the island. They hadn't had a thing to eat since the previous night, so their stomachs must be about to growl by now. They'd probably come plodding back of their own accord before long. By now, Natsu was thoroughly exasperated and started to feel that there was no such reason for them to go out of their way in search. I will go to the kitchen and prepare some tea for all the guests. Thanks to both of you for all your hard work so early in the morning. Natsu left the parlor, acting as though the release in tension had caused a new surge in her headache. Canon tried to call her back, but Natsu left swiftly.
What is it? Was there something else? Yes. I wasn't able to find her husband or anyone else, but... Well...
Canon sounded evasive. It looked as though he didn't know where they were, but had spotted something that might be connected to their disappearance. Ava and Hideyoshi noticed the exchange of words and came over. They probably picked on something strange in Canon's behavior. What's going on, Canon? Did you find Kraus and everyone else?
Actually, the Rose Garden storehouse looks strange. What do you mean? It looks strange.
It was, how should I explain it? Canon hesitated once more. His tone wasn't all that you would expect from this usually fearless boy. Seeing this, Ava and Hideyoshi looked at each other dubiously.
What do you mean? Are you saying Nisa and the others were inside the storehouse? No, I'm going to inspect the inside now. I just came back to get the key, but,
I don't really get it, but it sounds like we just gotta look around inside it. Where's the key to that storehouse?
It is in the servant room. Let's check inside the storehouse at once.
Canon dashed off to the servant room and returned with the key. Genji left the parlor, saying that he would go check, but then Ava and Hideyoshi followed after him. What was this something strange about the storehouse that had caused the usually fearless Canon to hesitate? It was still pouring outside, but perhaps their curiosity over this something that Canon couldn't talk about won out. While the children made a big fuss watching television, Canon and the rest dashed over to the entrance of the storehouse. The Rose Garden storehouse was a place that housed various schools used to manage the garden. It was definitely not a pretty building. Because of its appearance, it was built so that it was hidden in a corner of the Rose Garden. Canon, Genji, Ava, and Hideyoshi came cutting across the Rose Garden holding umbrellas. They entered a small path just off the Rose Garden, which was normally off limits for those appreciating the garden and only used by those maintaining it. They dashed down that and the storehouse came to view in front of them. It was quite an old shed, and compared to the flawlessly perfect beauty of the Rose Garden, it was pretty seedy. It was easy to understand why it had been built in a hard-to-see place. Ava Hideyoshi arrived at the storehouse long before after Canon and Genji. You sure are fast! I thought my heart was gonna explode!
I never knew they had a storehouse way over here. But, what is that?
Ava looked where Canon was pointing. She was at a loss for words. Noticing this, Hideyoshi also followed Canon's finger and was likewise too shocked to speak. The entrance to the storehouse was kind of a shudder. And there, everyone suddenly realized why Canon had been unable to find words to describe what they now saw. On the shutter, which was completely filthy from being exposed to wind and rain for so long, stuck right on it. There was something that looked like a strange dark red liquid, mucus, or maybe it was some sticky paint. An indescribably eerie shade was drawn on the shutter with some kind of ghastly substance. The rain had caused it to drip down like fresh blood leaking from an open wound. No more beating around the bush. Some kind of mark was drawn there, with a ghastly substance that looked like blood, in a shape that seemed to suggest something ominous. 2 circles were drawn there, and inside them was a design that looked like a cross. The 4 ends of the cross were wildly exaggerated. It looked like some kind of crest from somewhere around Europe. The cracks in between these shapes, written closely packed together, were some sort of unfamiliar characters, or possibly symbols. What a vulgar bit of graffiti! Could this be one of those? Are the magic circles used in demonic ceremonies? It wasn't surprising that Hideyoshi would say such a thing about a ghastly shape drawn in deep red dripping substance.
When was this made?
Last night I came here before it started raining. There was something drawn here at the time.
We must do something before anyone else sees this. If they lays eyes upon it, it will cause them great discomfort. That's right. Even though it's just a shed, I wouldn't want to leave such an unpleasant piece of graffiti alone for even a second longer than I had to. There's some paint inside the storehouse. Let's paint over it temporarily as an emergency measure. Never paint it again someday when the weather is good.
Genji remembered he had recently seen another scribble, and that too had been made with strange dark red substance of the same color as this. That must have been... That's right. He'd seen it to the door to Natsuki's room.
Canon, let's remove the scribble quickly and go back, okay?
even though it's just a storehouse. It's really irritating to have graffiti around the home I was brought up in. Yes, ma'am. I will take care of it immediately. Cannon squatted in front of the shutter and unlocked it. He then lifted it up with all his strength. Boisterous noise resounded. The eerie shape drawn on the shutter began to get sucked in through the top as the shutter was raised. At least for the time being, that ominous drawing disappeared from the direct gaze. They all sighed a breath of relief. Thanks to the kids' program they came across, Maria was feeling much better. Battler and Jessica were poking fun at the kids' show at every turn, cackling together. George was enjoying the program with Maria from her perspective. Nanjo sat on the sofa by himself, passing the time by reading quietly. They heard hurried footsteps coming from the hallway. They were the footsteps of a single person. But that meant it wasn't the group of the four that had just left. It was Genji. It was very rare for Genji, who was considered being out of a breath of violations of certain virtues, to be gasping for air. He'd probably come dashing back from outside the mansion. His shoulders were soaking wet. He didn't have his usual trim appearance. When Genji noticed Nanjo looking at him, he gave a small silent bow and quickly approached him.
Dr. Nanjo, my apologies. Please come with me quickly.
What is the matter? As Genji whispered something into Nanjo's ear, Nanjo went pale. He rose from the sofa, trying not to be noticed by the children who were still engrossed by the TV. The two of them rapidly left the parlor, muffling their footsteps. Just as they were about to exit the parlor, they came across Natsuki, who was pushing a serving cart loaded with a tea set. Genji whispered something into Natsuki's ear. Natsuki went pale too in apparent shock. Leaving the serving cart where it was, the three of them dashed toward the entrance. George noticed them running down the rose garden through the window. What's that? Isn't that Genji and Dr. Nanjo and that's Aunt Natsuki, isn't it? What's up, Aniki? Maybe something happened. They look terribly flustered. When Jessica and Maria saw Ava and Hideyoshi and Nanjo were no longer in their seats and the serving cart had been abandoned in the entrance of the parlor, they also realized something was the matter. Could there have been some kind of accident? Let's go check it out. It's no fun if we're the only ones left out, right? For some reason, what Ballard said sounded extremely indiscreet. They couldn't deny they were a little insecure and concerned after seeing the adults run out in the rain without regards to their appearance. Let's check it out, okay? I'm worried something might have happened. Jessica's uneasy words spoke for all of them. Hey, Maria, are you coming too? Or will you watch TV? Wanna watch TV? Let's go on without her. Maria, we'll be back soon. Keep watching TV, okay? By the time the kids made it outside, the adults were no longer in sight. But Jessica seemed to have a good idea where they'd gone, judging by the direction they'd been running. Following Jessica, we ran through the rain-soaked rose garden. The wind seemed to suddenly get stronger. The malicious sound of thunder began to ring out like the previous night. It felt like an eerie something had surrounded the island. It was trying to stop us from moving forward. By the way, if you can't tell, it is obviously inspired by Agatha Christie, and also another thing. Forgot to say that Umineko has a lot of rereadability. So yeah, there's a lot of things I won't say. And it's a lot of fun to go through this over and over again in hindsight. So I really wanted to say it. I don't know when I was going to be able to say it, so I'm just going to say it now. Jessica, is there something over this way? I'm pretty sure there's a storehouse for gardening tools or something. What in the world would be going on in a place like that? Just as Jessica had said, they began to see a storehouse in front of them. They could also see the adults there. The shutter to the storehouse was open, and several adults looked through as they were searching for something. For some reason, only Natsu was outside the storehouse without even holding an umbrella. She looked like she was hanging her head, and her back was facing them. There was Genji, Nanjo, and Natsu who had left the mansion. The ones who had left earlier, Ken and Ava, and Yoshi were also there, making a small crowd of people. There was absolutely no bustle of activity. When Natsu realized the children were approaching, a terrible expression rose to her face. She ran at them with her arms spread wide.
You mustn't come any closer! Go back to the mansion!
But despite that, no, because of that, the kids saw the scene Natsu was trying to keep them away from. Inside the storehouse with its shutter wide open, a flame fluorescent light shone down. And right there it was. Jessica's piercing shriek rang out. That was just because Jessica's scream was the loudest. The same thing spilled out of Valor in George's mouth as well. Ava spread out her arms like Natsu, roaring at the kids with a bone-chilling expression on her face.
George, take everyone and return to the mansion! Quickly! Right now!
When Natsu spread out her arms, she thought she was trying to prevent us from advancing any further. But that wasn't why Ava was spreading her arms right now. She was trying to stop us kids from seeing that terrible scene. It was her mother's heart trying to protect the eyes and hearts of us children by blocking our view of that terrible scene by at least the width of one of her arms.
Is this some kind of joke? Is it?
I'd seen this kind of cheap scene all too often. Manga, TV, anime, video, movies. I'd seen it over and over again. This is just seeing something appear in real life that I'd seen plenty of times before in those sensational movies, right? That alone shouldn't... But that suit... That old bastards, isn't it? I get it. That's Uncle Kraus, Kiri, and Aunt Rosa! Ah!
Dad! Dad! You mustn't, Jessica. You mustn't go in. You mustn't look. Dad! Dad! Ah!
Rigor mortis is set in now across the entire body. Most likely, 6 hours or more have passed since death. As far as I can tell by looking at the damaged areas, there's a high probability they were damaged after their deaths. No, I must watch what I say. I'm a general practitioner. Examining corpses is outside my area of expertise. So what does that mean? Just killing them wasn't enough, so they had to do something like this! The devil! Here's the work of the devil! Aunt Natsu caught Jessica in her arms, and Aunt Ava caught George. So I was the only one who could approach the entrance to the storehouse. Only there had been someone there to catch me too. I wouldn't have to see this horrible evil scene burn into my eyes. No, that's not it. It isn't that there's no one here to catch me. The people who should catch me, they're right there, aren't they? This is Jessica said, it looked like a storehouse for gardening tools. A lawnmower with extra blades, a grass sickle, and a hammer. Some carpentry tools such as a saw. Piled up potted plants and bags of fertilizer, and treated just the same like the corpses of several people had been laid to rest there. No, had been tossed in there. I could tell them by their clothes. That old bastard and Kyrie, Uncle Kraus and Aunt Rosa, beyond that Goda and... Are there still more of them? How many people died? You're fucking kidding me! I can't even count them on one hand, damn it! No, whether I'd been one of these gardening tools, which if used for something other than their intended purpose, could definitely be wielded with naked brutality, or whether some horrible tool had been brought in there specifically for this. Anyway, each one of these bodies jammed in here had been given an atrocious makeup. It wasn't just makeup, it was more like faces had been plowed. Their faces were smashed, forced into expressions that normal people couldn't even make after death. I couldn't even tell where the eyes or noses were, but I could find their mouths because they were gaping wide, their gums exposed. Their front teeth were missing, and even their cheeks that should have covered all this torn up and laid bare. That trendy makeup you always spent so much time on, even though you're a man, isn't doing a thing now. Dad! I always thought you were going to hell, but still, not like this, right? You weren't such a son of a bitch that you should have suffered so brutally. And Kyrie, I got no faces! No faces! Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! Ah! Valor, you mustn't look anymore. There's no way your mother and father will want you to see them. Mother and father's sakes, you mustn't look anymore. Dead people are supposed to have faces that look like they're sleeping peacefully, right? They've got no faces! My dad and Kiri had no faces! I don't even know what kind of faces they were wearing when they died! What's wrong with me? Will I have to see these smashed monster-like faces every time I remember them? That's just great. I didn't want to remember that old bastard smug face anyway! Just great! Just great! Why even Kiri's face? Kiri wasn't a crook. Sure, she ticked me off a bit now and then. She was like a cool big sister to me. This is wrong. This is all wrong! At least Uncle Kraus has a better destiny! It's not like his whole face just aside. At least he's just got his face left, right? That's still better! That's still better! No! Jessica filled her ears with the sound of her own screaming, trying to shut out my reckless words. Stop it, Valor! Just stop it! Just stop it! Aniki! Aniki! Ah! Disregarding age and appearance, I fell to my knees, clinging to Aniki's waist and sobbing. It was as if I was crying on behalf of everyone there. Representing the feelings of everyone there, I screamed over and over. Father, the ones lying over there are Uncle Kraus, Uncle Rudolph, Aunt Kyrie, and Aunt Rosa and Goda. Just those 5, right? No, there are 6 people. There's one more person over here. The body Hideyoshi was looking down on now happened to be hidden among the shadows in that mountain range of objects, in a blind spot to George, who stood there by the entrance, so George couldn't tell whose body it was. So George cursed himself. He cursed the fact his worst guesses always turned out to be right. So, the one lying at your feet is Shannon, isn't it? Yes, it's Shannon. I love this song, but yeah. George fell completely silent. He shook slightly, his lower lip trembling. Normally, he would have wanted to run his beloved's body, screaming and crying. However, before rashly rushing forward, he worked to keep his composure and asked his father, "Is Shannon the same as Uncle Kraus and the others?" Hideyoshi deeply understood the meaning of those words, so he couldn't give George an immediate answer. Or rather, he felt that silence was the only sincere and loving response he could give George right now. When George asked if Shannon was the same, he meant to ask whether her corpse was in the same condition as the others or not, since Hideyoshi hadn't denied it. It meant her corpse was in the same brutal state. "Can I look at Shannon?" "No, you can't." "Why not? After all, I won't be able to see Shannon's face again, right? So, why won't you let me see what her face looked like at the end?" "The last time you met Shannon was yesterday, right?" "Yes." "I see. When you left her, what kind of face was she showing you?" It was a wonderful smile. After he handed her the ring, she hesitated, even though she must have already made up her mind, and she looked bashful and ran away because she was embarrassed to let him see her face looking like that. That's the expression that was revived in George's mind. "I see. Then I'm sure Shannon would want to leave you with that smile in your memory." Hideyoshi looked down upon Shannon's body lying at his feet. Just like the other bodies, It was in such a horrible state that it would make anyone want to cover their eyes. Her head had been smashed in front from the side, and no more than half her expression remained. If the remaining blood-soaked half of her expression had been wiped clean, would that graceful smile of hers have peeked out? But only half of it. Without thinking, Hideyoshi slapped his hands over his eyes. How brutal. Her face was going to be crushed anyway, and if only all of it had been crushed, he might have been able to temporarily distract George from his pain by making the pathetic suggestion that it was someone else wearing Shannon's clothes. But half of her face had been left untouched. It caused the body so much humiliation, while still proving beyond doubt that body was Shannon's and no one else's. How inhumane, how brutish. And there, trying his best to burn the image of the remaining half of Shannon's expression into his eyes as she lay at Hideyoshi's feet, was Kanon. Kanon was not crying. Tears had risen to his eyes, but they did not drip down. But that didn't mean he wasn't feeling as much sadness as everyone else. Losing Shannon, who would live with him in the same orphanage, whom he had loved as a sister, must have been just the same as losing a blood relative. George, I'm sure Shannon is saying thank you. She must be glad you didn't end up seeing her in such a pitiful state. I'm sure she's thanking you and holding strong and showing restraint. I understand, Father. I understand. George leaned against the outside wall of the storehouse, crouching down limply. Father, I have a request. What is it? I want you to look for me. Is there a ring on Shannon's finger? A ring. Let me see. Hideyoshi crouched down. As he did, Kanon silently pointed to one of Shannon's hands. Yeah, there is. It's a diamond ring with a valuable diamond. Must have been pretty expensive. And which hand? And which finger is it on? The ring finger of her left hand. I see. So Shannon was engaged? George, don't tell me you... Ava! That doesn't matter now. A man made a lifelong promise to Shannon. A man promised her happiness for life. Who that man wasn't the issue here. Being told that by a man is a woman's dream, isn't it? I don't know when she received this ring, and I don't know who gave it to her. However, even so, Shannon took this ring. Then she accepted it and put it on her left ring finger. I'm sure the man who gave it to her was also happy. To most of the people there, Hideyoshi was simply disturbed by this extraordinary situation that was just blurring out nonsense. However, someone who knew of George and Shannon's true relationship would understand the full meaning of those words. I see. Thank you. Father. George stood up. The traces of tears still streaked his face, but his expression had returned to its usual calm one. Let's go. Battler, Jessica, if we stay here any longer, we'll get in the way of the adults. You're right. Jessica sniffled once, showing her face to her mother, who had been holding her the whole time to let her know that she was okay now. When she faced George again, she once again had on her usual expression, although she still couldn't smile. Battler, hang in there. Battler kept on crouching in front of his parents' body. I'm sorry. Crying like hell calmed me down. You bastard, Dad. I bet you're laughing at me. After that, all that shit I talked about you, here I am crying like a baby just because you died. Well, so what? I guess I just got that gene that makes you cry when your parents kick the bucket. Balor's face was still bright red from the tears, but at least recovered enough to fake a smile, if only a bitter one. Kano, you mustn't remain here any longer. Take the children and return to the mansion. Natsu had been standing under the rain this whole time, unable to take a step into the storehouse. Maybe she had her own way of grieving, different from Balor's. Realizing she had to take on the responsibility of a role that now her husband was dead, she gave Kano those orders. Yes, madame. Kanon rose silently and turned to face me. His face was pure white, almost as though his own heart had died along with Shannon, and there was no life in his expression. On an ordinary day, if he had been told to guide the children down the beautiful rose garden, Kanon might have led the way. But now there was no distinction between Kanon and the children. They were now just about kids of the same age, suffering the pain of losing those close to them. After making sure the children were leaving, Natsuki started giving orders to Genji. Genji, contact the police immediately. They probably won't be able to come until the typhoon passes, but they should be able to tell us what to do next.
Understood. There's an emergency radio, so I will use that to contact them.
When she heard that, Natsuki remembered. That's right, the phones were out today, weren't they? However, they had a radio, so they couldn't necessarily rely on phones all the time while living on an isolated island. At any rate, they should start contacting the police and receiving their instructions. Everything else could wait.
Dr. Nancho, is there anything more you can do here?
Unfortunately, there is nothing I can do. Oops, why did I give him that?
Understood. Genji, could you at least cover their faces with something? Exposing them like this is humiliating to them as well.
Yes, ma'am. Genji picked up the several dried towels from inside the storehouse. Ava stopped him with a shrill voice.
Wait a second! Stop! This is the scene of the crime, isn't it? Then we mustn't disturb it.
We all panicked and walked in here with our shoes on,
but even that will surely get in the way of the police's investigation, right?
Natsuki glared at Ava, offended. Objectively speaking, Ava was right. Even so, she glared at Ava as though accusing her of refusing to do those tragic corpses which had been humiliated even after death. The simple kindness of covering their faces. However, Ava spoke both calmly and correctly. This horrible situation definitely wasn't an accident. It was a crime. Someone had killed them. It was a murder case. They needed to be careful to avoid disturbing the site any further. They had to do what little they could to aid the police, preserving clues that might help catch the detestable culprit.
I agree with Ava. I don't know why I also had a Western accent until a moment ago. I think the person reading this messed up. I'm sorry. Until the police come, we should leave everything be. What do you say, madame? You're right. Very well. Close it up. And just in case, we should put a different lock on it.
I love that song, World End Solo. I'm sorry if I messed up anything. I remember I first read that in the visual novel. Like, this is the first scene that I ever read. After I watched the anime, I read this. This was the first scene I ever read from the visual novel. It's just miles different. Hold on, I have to do something. Okay.
A different lock. Yes. When we came here, the shutter was locked. That means the culprit used the key to the shutter to lock it.
That makes sense. So that means that key that opens the shutter will have fingerprints culprits on it. I mean, culprits' fingerprints on it.
I'm sure it'll be worth submitting to the police as evidence, but Kanon usually has it, and he used it to unlock the shed just now. It'll probably have Kanon's fingerprints on it. Also, that key was handed to Genji just now, and he took it with his bare hands. It doesn't look like it'll be very useful as evidence. That was careless of me. My apologies.
Genji, are there any other keys to the storehouse?
No, only this one.
So the culprit walked out of the servant room with that key. If that's enough to return the key to where they found it. Hideyoshi's theory sounded plausible, but was actually very strange if you thought about it. Why would they go to all the trouble of returning a key they stole? No. If you think about it even more deeply, there are some points that are even more bizarre. When a criminal hides a body, they're usually trying to delay the point at which it'll be found so they can use that time to escape. The 6 weren't necessarily killed here, but it was reasonable to assume that they were killed somewhere on the island and carried to the storehouse and hidden to delay the discovery of the crime. And yet, this eerie magic symbol scribbled on the storehouse and shutter had eloquently indicated the location of the hidden corpses. Sure, it didn't explicitly mention the corpses, but 6 people had gone missing, and that situation, someone had made an obvious piece of graffiti and even returned the key to the shutter, almost as though they wanted the corpses here to be discovered. Anyway, we can't all put our faith in a lock that the culprit has opened once before. If we want to protect this place from the culprit's hand, I think we should put a new lock on it. I think that is a good plan. I agree. Genji fished around inside the storehouse and unsealed it with a brand new padlock that had been inside the small box. What should I do with the key? I will take it. I will take responsibility and hand it over to the police. Natsu took the key to the padlock from Genji's hand. After that, they all exited and lowered the shutter. And so the corpses were once again sealed behind that shutter, which is still covered in that creepy magic circle. Genji crouched down in front of the shutter to fasten the new padlock. Shutters often have a place in front where you can attach your own lock, in addition to the main lock of the shutter. This was one of those types. In the midst of the roar of the thunder and the pouring rain, the storehouse stood there ominously, with its closed shutter still covered in a blood-like creepy substance and swallowed up the bodies of the six. To Natsuki, putting the new lock wasn't mainly to preserve this scene for the police. She might have felt like she wanted to shut that mouth for all eternity, to prevent the eerie beast from swallowing up any more victims. Come on, let's go, everyone. Dr. Nanjo, thank you very much for your work. Genji, hurry up and contact the police.
I will do so as soon as I return.
The adults left the storehouse. The ghastly magic circle drawn on the shutter kept the six bodies in its throat, gleaming eerily as the lightning occasionally lit it up. And we will finish the chapter. I'm sorry if there was any hiccups during my reading. Let's see if there's anything else to do or add. Oh, right, I have to save. Oh, no. Oh, and notice because like the character portraits have changed. Let's read those. Ushiromiya Kraus. His corpse was found inside the Rose Garden storehouse. Direct cause of death is unknown, but it seems the side of his head was smashed after his death. This is the beginning of everything. Okay. Ushiromiya Rudolph. His corpse was found inside the Rose Garden storehouse. His face seems to have been smashed after death. He has a right to lament his ill fortune. Ushiromiya Kyrie. Her corpse was found inside the Rose Garden storehouse. Her face seems to have been smashed after his death. She was chosen by the Demon's Roulette. That's all there is to it. Ushiromiya Rosa. Her corpse was found inside the Rose Garden storehouse. Her face seems to have been smashed after her death. I'll get to see her again, so I don't feel lonely. Huh. I wonder who's saying that. Servant Shannon. Her corpse was found inside the Rose Garden storehouse. It seems the side of her head was smashed after her death. Don't worry, everyone. Everyone will be revived in the Golden Land. Servant Goda. His corpse was found inside the Rose Garden storehouse. His face seems to have been smashed after his death. How unfortunate. Apparently he was originally supposed to be on duty in the guest house. Oops. Can I try that again? Servant Goda. His corpse was found inside the Rose Garden storehouse. His face seems to have been smashed after his death. How unfortunate. Apparently, he was originally supposed to be on duty in the guest house. Alright, there we go. Nothing else has changed. And we are done. Good night.